Welcome to the Dare to Grow Show. I'm Sarah Morgan, and my mission is to help you take daily action in your business, show up consistently and confidently for your audience, and earn more with digital products and programs. I know you have a rad vision for your life and business, but do you dare to grow? Let's jump into this episode and talk about how to make it happen. Welcome to the podcast. We made it. It's episode 100. If you think I'm buying myself a cake to celebrate, you are right. Creating a podcast is no joke, and I am absolutely going to celebrate over here. Actually, I have a bunch of audience appreciation giveaways happening over on Instagram this week, so you can come celebrate with me. Find me at XO Sarah Morgan. Let's party, and you can win some stuff. And I would not have made it to episode 100 without the help of my podcast team, so we got to start there. Thank you to Allison and Steve over at podcastingforcreatives.com. They edit and upload my podcast every week, and I think they've done all but like the first 3 episodes, I think. So they really have been a big part of me making it to episode 100. They saved me time. They saved me from having to listen to myself talk and make sure I sound like a pro, even though I am recording episodes in my closet. I also have to thank my assistant, Lindsay, who edits my scripts, creates graphics, and schedules everything so that you have an email and a blog post every week. I really wish I had hired her or help for that part in general way earlier. That was always my last headache before publishing, and so I really appreciate her taking over those edits and putting together the blog post and the email for me so I can save some time. If I was doing all of the editing and all of the admin, that would add like 5 hours to my schedule every week. So here's your first tip. If you're starting a podcast, get yourself some help. I was lucky enough to have Allison reach out to me after my first episode, and I already knew I wanted to hire help, so that worked out perfectly. But I always say the more you enjoy things, the easier it is to be consistent. I enjoy creating lessons for you and recording episodes, but listening to my voice to edit the audio, not so much. So as you're creating your podcast or really any project, pay attention to what you enjoy, what feels tough, and get some help to make the process easier on yourself. So I will leave their link in the show notes, but if you want to hire Allison and Steve, it's podcastingforcreatives.com. And maybe you don't 100% have the budget to hire help yet, but think about the clients and customers who will find you through your podcasts and the other audiences you'll reach by having guests or the sponsor that could pay for all of your podcast expenses. You can get sponsors before you have any episodes if you are good at pitching. And if that's something that's holding you back, put in some time to figure it out. Figure out what it's going to cost, especially if you're not a video person, because that's really your best option right now. But I know that there are a ton of you holding back your whole business and your marketing by not showing up because you don't want to do video. So podcasting could be your alternative. Next, I want to talk about the show format. So the format of your show and how often you release episodes is completely up to you. It seems like there are a lot of rules for podcasts, especially some of the larger, like story-based ones, where they all have a certain vibe and they talk in this certain cadence, which I cannot stand, by the way. But really, it's just about creating an audio file. So whatever is in that file is up to you. You want to sing your audience a song every week? Do it. You want to bring them along as you cook breakfast and share your souffle secrets? Do it. You can do anything you want. There are no rules. I put off starting a podcast for a long time until I heard Amanda Francis's episodes because she didn't have an intro at all. And they weren't hour-long shows, and she didn't do interviews. I don't even think she stuck to a schedule. She just showed up whenever she had something to share, whatever form that was in. So sometimes it was tips, sometimes it was just a meditation, sometimes audio from her old videos. She just did whatever the fuck she wanted in service of her audience. Seeing someone else do a podcast in such a different, free-flowing way helped me to see that I could create my own format too. So if you're thinking of starting a podcast but aren't sure about the format, the length, think about what your potential customers or clients most need to hear. So before they're going to hire you, before they're going to purchase something, join your program, what do they need to hear? And when are they listening to podcast episodes? Are they on a commute? Are they on a morning run? Is it their midday break? Do they listen once a week, once a month? Why do they listen to podcast episodes, and why will they listen to your podcast specifically? So look at the other podcasts in your industry and see how can you show up differently? What's missing from those podcasts? What will get them excited to subscribe to your show? And most importantly, we don't want to make like a content black hole where you're just creating to create day after day, week after week. So what is the goal of your podcast? Do you want more leads, more people coming onto your email list, more people following you on social media? Is it more clients, more customers? Do you want to build your authority? Maybe you want to book speaking gigs, and so you're going to do a podcast to build your authority as a speaker. Maybe it's just connecting with others in your industry. If you're doing interviews, that's a great way to do networking kind of in a sneaky way. Answering those questions will help you determine what your audience needs to hear and how you can show up and connect with them daily, weekly, monthly, whatever your jam is. And when I was thinking about starting a podcast, I paid a lot of attention to how I listened to other people's podcasts. Admittedly, I'm not a big podcast listener because I don't have a lot of that downtime in my day, and I choose to use my downtime to watch TV instead. But things that made me subscribe to a show, things I wanted to do for my own show, things I found really annoying. One of those things that totally annoyed me was when there was a really long intro, either a long pre-recorded intro that is exactly the same on every episode, or when the host would spend like the first 5 to 10 minutes just talking about the guest or how excited they are or random stuff unrelated to the guest or the topic. I would scroll through like the first 15 minutes of somebody's show. So for me, that's fine once in a while, but I was really skipping forward on a lot of podcasts just to get to the meat of the episode, which is why I really put a lot of value into my episodes, but they're super short. And it's why I made my intro only 30 seconds long. This way, new listeners do get that quick intro to the podcast, what we're going to talk about, who I am. But it's also easy to skip over for people who listen every week or who are going to binge multiple episodes in a row. So something to think about. How can you introduce yourself and your podcast thoroughly enough for newbies, but without making your regular listeners have to scroll around to find the actual start of your content? A lot of apps allow you to skip 15 seconds forward or backward, so making your intro a multiple of 15 really will help to make it easy for people who love your show and listen all the time to skip forward really quickly. And then you might also add an outro that's going to go at the end. Again, nothing is required, so if you're not into intros or outros, you can skip them. So mine is currently a promo for the Dare to Grow membership, since all of my trainings are housed in that one spot. But you could have multiple options if you have more than one offer, or use it to promote webinars, challenges, one-off events, or you could just have music at the end, which I did for a while. It was like just 10 seconds at the end, the same music from my intro, just to kind of like wrap things up. I made my intro and outro myself, so I recorded a voiceover and then I added the background music that I purchased online. And I know a lot of people have professionals make theirs and it has like a voiceover or there's like layered audio with lots of effects. But most people, once they know what your podcast is about, are not going to listen to your intro. So it feels like a big deal, but make something that just matches the vibe of your show. Introduce yourself and your topic and then get on with it. Like, don't put tons and tons of time into your intro because that can be better spent on content planning. Yes. So you can fill the first couple of months or weeks of episodes with your most popular content. Blog posts, emails, Instagram posts, YouTube videos. As long as it's still relevant, any content that has already done well with your audience will do well again. And it will also give brand new people a sneaky tour of all of your best stuff. And remember, even if your audience has heard those things before, share it again because it will give them another opportunity to hear that message, whether they heard it the first time or not, and another opportunity to really put that into their brain and give them a chance to learn from you. Another thing to remember is that people need to connect with you multiple times before they'll buy into what you're selling. It used to be that people had to see something like an ad on TV or a billboard like 7 times, but that number is increasing as the amount of content in general grows and our attention spans or our focus is getting shorter. And for content planning, you can use your regular content planning tools. So if you have a way of planning blog posts or Instagram content or emails, that process will totally work for podcasts as well. So in Dare to Grow, we use our content matrix, which is, if you're looking for it, inside the content planning workshop. The matrix essentially asks you, what is your audience struggling with today? And if that struggle keeps happening, what would be the long-term negative consequences? So, for example, today my audience might be struggling trying to come up with content ideas the day before something needs to be published. And then the long-term consequences would be never growing their audience to the point of sustaining their business. And then the other side of the matrix is, what would today look like without that problem? Or what would the next year or 5 years look like without that problem as well? Best case scenario. So for the same example, it could be today they didn't even think about Instagram because all of their posts for this week are scheduled and ready to go, and they don't have to do anything. And long term, they show up consistently for months while not spending a ton of time on Instagram or worrying about what to post, and they're able to fill up their client roster or sell out their program. So we use that to understand what potential clients or customers are thinking about and wishing for so that we can create content that they identify with and moves them into taking action. Because remember, your podcast is part of your marketing funnel. So your content has to connect with your ideal customers or clients and get them moving. Now, let's talk about actually creating the episodes. First, at the beginning of every month, I plan all of my content for all of the platforms at once. One spot, one calendar. Again, that is all in the content planning workshop inside of Dare to Grow if you want to see that process. And this helps me make sure that I am promoting enough and that if I'm running a webinar or a promotion, that my content helps drive my audience to those things. So if I'm running a webinar about a specific topic, some of the podcast episodes for that month are going to be related to that, or the month before related to that. And this includes, for me, Instagram, email, and podcast episodes. And then every week I sit down and I essentially write a shitty first draft of what will become the blog post version of the podcast. And this gives me enough of a script to stay on track as I'm recording, but it also helps to keep me from sounding like I'm reading because I'm still ad-libbing a little bit. Like if I just read it from scratch, it's not going to make 100% sense. And honestly, sometimes I throw the word like into a sentence or slow down as I'm reading, or add an extra sentence that isn't written down to make it sound more like a conversation and less like a speech. And that has definitely taken practice. I'm pretty sure my first couple of episodes sounded a lot more like I was reading or like more robotic. And I like to be honest over here. So there is one thing that I've been struggling with, which is getting my episodes done on time or early. Early would be better. So my editor needs the episode by the Monday before it's published. And I've been recording a lot of the episodes for the past year on Saturday or Sunday. And yes, I will confess that I am currently recording this episode on a Sunday, the day before my editor needs it. But honestly, at this point, it's happened so often that it's become a habit instead of a stressor. I used to get kind of worked up about working on the weekend, and I'm like, whatever, I'll just do the podcast episode on Sunday. It'll be fine. And it is fine, but it's not the best way to do this, at least for me. So because it's a habit, it's become a little bit harder to change, but I do have a few things that helped. Number one, having bullet points already on the page when I sit down to write so that I am not starting from scratch. Number two, writing that shitty rough draft on a Monday or Tuesday instead of having to write the full script later in the week. So I'm giving myself a little head start. And then number three, I've been putting my recording day on Wednesday, so I have more of a buffer. I did that 2 weeks ago and it worked really well. This week I did not, so it's Sunday while we're recording this. Now, because my episodes are only like 10 to 20 minutes long, most of them are solo episodes, the best option would be to get ahead by a few weeks and then schedule 3 days once a month to write all the scripts, edit all the scripts, and record all 4 episodes at the same time and have nothing else scheduled. Now, while this has been challenging, once I get in the recording booth, aka my closet, where I am now, I really feel like I'm recording a message for a friend, and that makes me feel so happy and so excited, which really does keep me going, even with some of these weekend recording sessions. And the other part is that I've smoothed out or delegated every other piece of the podcast process so that one difficult part doesn't make me want to quit or make it so hard that it's like terrible trying to do this every week. If I also had to edit the audio and the blog post, I would have not made it to episode 100. That would have been way more hours, more difficulty because I can be a little bit of a perfectionist, and just more stress over not enjoying doing those things. So because the rest of the process is a lot easier, doing these Sunday episodes is not so bad, but I do want to change it. So to give you like a quick tech rundown, I use a Blue Yeti mic and it's plugged into my computer. And then I record on my computer using QuickTime, which is like a simple audio video recorder that you probably already have on your computer. I record in my closet, like I said. The fact that it's full of clothes and I've got some like beach towels in here and the floor is carpeted really does add some more soundproofing. So even though it looks silly, it's very effective. Episode drafts, which are going to become the blog posts, are written in Google Docs. So I just take my laptop into the closet, plug my mic in, and go for it. It's not a big complicated process for actually recording, and it usually takes me less than 30 minutes. And then once that audio is done, I upload that into Dropbox for my editor, and then my assistant is able to access the script in Google Docs. And then that's kind of the end of my part of the process. My podcast is also hosted on Libsyn, if you're trying to figure out podcast hosts. And really, that's the way my podcast started. Like, none of this stuff has changed. It still works. It's still fairly easy and comfortable. Not a lot of friction in getting things done. So, yeah, it's like a one-woman band in here in my closet with a really simple setup, and you can totally do the same thing. So lastly, I want to talk about promotion. Once you start your podcast, you need to make sure that you promote it outside of just releasing it on your podcast platform. Especially if you already have an audience or an email list, this is how you're going to initially grow. And it's a great way to re-engage people who maybe are on your email list or follow you somewhere and are this close to hiring you or buying from you. Having more like, I call it FaceTime, even though you can't see my face, but that really goes a long way to building that connection and the trust you need to have someone purchase from you. And this promotion could be an email, could be a blog post, could be a story, you could go live, could be all of the above. So how are you going to remind your audience to go listen? I actually found that audiograms, even though they're really popular, didn't do well for me on Instagram. So I stopped making those. Audiograms are the graphic that has like a little like squiggly audio bar and you can just hear part of the podcast. For me, they just didn't get enough engagement to keep making those. So now I'm experimenting with reels where I talk about the problem and I mention the podcast in the comments, but the video still stands on its own as a full piece of content. And then I'm also testing carousels that essentially share the main points from the podcast, again, as its own piece of content. But then in the caption, I'm sending people to that episode of the podcast if they want more details. And this way, I'm sharing long-form content and short-form content for the same topic. So I'm catching more audience members because they have more options to learn about that week's topic. So if you're on my email list, you might have already noticed that we've been experimenting with what day we send the podcast email. It used to go out on Thursdays when the new episode was released, but I was on a mastermind call last month and another podcaster said she likes to send her emails a few days after, more as a reminder and less as that initial encouragement to go listen. So no matter what options you choose for promotion, keep an eye on your data. we're going to try sending email on different dates over the next couple of months to see if there are any changes to the number of downloads. And then once we know what actually works, then we'll stick with that day of the week and sending the email at the same time and start testing something else. And I'll add a link to Dare to Grow. Members actually have access to my podcast document, which has the step-by-step process for planning, creating, and launching. So if you have questions on hosting platforms, how to make graphics, how to get your podcast on all of the apps like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, I have a document with my process for all of that. It's not horribly complicated, but it will definitely save you some time on research. And you will also have access to our Facebook group. So I can answer any questions you have and just cheer you on. We've had 3 members use that document to launch their podcasts over the past, I think, year. So if you need support, I've got you. You can click the link in the show notes or head over to daretogrow.co and you can use the code podcast2022 for half off of your first month. So lastly, for today, I want to say thank you personally for listening. A podcast without listeners just isn't very much fun. So I really appreciate you listening and hanging out with me every week. Even if it's only your first episode, it totally counts. I appreciate you if you've commented, shared, reviewed, sent me feedback on an episode that resonated with you. It really does make my day and help me keep showing up every week. So I cannot say it enough. Thank you, thank you, thank you. If I could send you all a piece of cake, I would. So thank you again for listening, for making my job fun, and cheers to the next 100 episodes, which now really feels like a huge number. Will I ever get to 200? Yes. I will stop recording on Sundays and we will make it to 200. But for now, cheers. Thank you for hanging out with me. I will talk to you again next week. Oh, and one more thing before I go. If you have any questions on anything we talked about today, or if you are looking for help to market and grow your business, head over to daretogrow.co. That's daretogrow.co and join us in Dare to Grow. It's my membership for solopreneurs looking to simplify their marketing, show up with confidence, and finally grow their online business. You will get instant access to all of the trainings, the twice monthly coaching calls, our monthly planning and goal setting call, and our super supportive Facebook community filled with solopreneurs just like you. Seriously, it's so good. If that sounds like something you need, link is in the show notes or visit daretogrow.co and I will see you inside.